Hello and welcome everyone to Digital Week Online. We are here today to discuss a panel that we've assembled to discuss smart cities, super intelligent cities, carbon footprint sustainability, and governments in cities. And so a large umbrella series of topics to cover under the general umbrella of smart cities or super smart cities. We have with us today three esteemed colleagues. We have Peter Chun, who is the president of World Smart Cities Forum. We have David Kasten, who is CEO of a Poolbeg Group, I'm sorry, and James Agri-Orleans, who is with Agritech. And so I certainly welcome all of you to be with us and joining us today as we get into and discuss these topics. My name is Richard Streitz. I am the moderator and I am COO of Rue Global Impact. We are a consultancy firm that helps groups and organizations and government agencies around the world work and deal with accessibility and inclusion as it relates to technologies, smart cities, and integrated systems. And so my background in smart cities is that I am an ex-Disney Imagineer. And so one of the interesting things about having built and designed theme parks and resorts around the world is that before the idea or terms of smart cities existed, theme parks and resorts are in fact integrated smart city environments because of the incredible integration that is required in running these large facilities, these small cities. A tremendous amount of system integration. So I fell into this, 25, 30 years ago, doing that level of work. And as I left Disney and smart cities started becoming a thing, I was always sort of involved in the discussions and conversations related to that, and especially when talking to government agencies and foreign governments in regard to how to help and integrate this as it relates to not only just integrated systems, but also accessibility and inclusion. So with that, I will quickly, and I'm going to be a staunch timekeeper to make sure we stay on track. But what I'd like to do is to give each of you a minute or two to sort of just give your background so that there is context. Everyone has some sort of context as to where we're all coming from when we're talking. And we'll go ahead and start with Peter.
Hi, it's very nice meeting you all. I think I just didn't know that you're just working for Disney. I actually just check out what the news in this morning that Disneyland just reopened. So yes. That's kind of quite exciting. But anyway, so the smart city in Disney, probably maybe another, fancy the project in the future, but probably maybe we can just put it aside. For the next topic anyway. So my name is Jaewon Peter Chun. I'm president of World Smart Cities Forum, which is actually a London-based nonprofit organization, but also I run the two different organizations, which is X&Tree, is the tech accelerator in Canary Wharf in East London, which nurtured more than 300 startups in the last 7 years. I was involved myself in dealing with the smart city challenging projects to create the AI intelligent smart city in Canary Wharf back in 2014 and 16, and where about 13 companies become unicorns. So we are actually working on the smart cities based on the innovation ecosystem. And another one is actually New York-based Archive Labs, and which is the investment arms for the smart city projects. So currently, World Smart Cities Forum, Archive Labs are working on the 7 different projects at a time in Vietnam, Ukraine, and the United States, and the UK, and Europe. So we are pretty much international, building up the master plan for the city, for the municipality government, central government. So every project is based on the mandate agreements. So in South Korea, for example, back in 2018, I was a national master plan for smart cities for the major city in South Korea, and which is worth of the $6 billion, and now probably maybe $10 billion. So I'm actually maybe going to make more comments on the roles of the public sectors and private sectors of the smart city should be this way. So looking forward to it.
Great, great. Thank you. Fantastic. David, please.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Dave Kasten. I made a career in U.S. government service, where I spent the vast majority of my time in the State Department, the Central Intelligence Agency, and later retiring out doing policy at the highest levels with the Department of Defense. Since that retirement, I got into the private sector. The Pullbeck Group is a strategy consulting firm. Basically, we use a combination of best practices and analytics and strategy implementation to help decision makers, make decisions and reach their end states. So we've got clients worldwide, mostly in the Middle East, as well as in Europe and Asia. We focus mostly in areas of strategy implementation, but as of the last, I don't know, year and a half, really have gotten involved in resiliency related issues. So energy, food, water, transportation. We also have connected tissues into the concepts and applications of City Labs, and we're really keen on looking at energy consumption behavioral changes. So those are the sort of the areas that we're involved in, and I'm very happy to be participating in this with you all.
Very good. Thank you. James.
Finally, my name is James Agri-Orleans. I have sort of spent the last 25 years working in financial services, but the last 3, I've been involved in a number of blockchain related projects, and there are a couple of them have had smart city implications as well. Right now, what I'm working on is an agri-tech project, but that agri-tech project speaks to the sustainability development goals and is actually yin and yang with smart cities. It's rural development. But I have a lot to learn, and I will be listening intently during the call today and adding my 2 cents.
Very good. Well, thank you. Actually, that's a very important issue that I look to get into is the city versus the ag area of smart cities, because they are actually related. People often only think of the urban environments. So that's great. All right. Well, yeah. Let's get right into it. So smart cities. What are they? There are millions of definitions, different groups define them in different ways. The public, you ask 100 people what a smart city is, you'll get 100 different answers. The public ranges from, the futuristic, fantastic, romantic idea of what a smart city is, to the mundane, more practical and realistic of infrastructural efficiency with electrical grids, water treatment, transportation, and so forth. So given that, as global thought leaders in this space, what is or is not a smart city, and what should the public and governments really be expecting when approaching a project? And, I throw that out to the room. Any of you can start answering, and we'll start the discussion.
I'll take it. I'll take it if you don't mind, Richard.
Sure, go ahead.
So I've always known smart cities to be a new approach to urbanization that would bring together, community building empowered by the use of new technology. That's how I've always understood smart cities, and I think that, certainly from my time at MIT, that is probably a universally accepted, with nuances to it, universally accepted sort of definition. It is not, this futuristic. I mean, to your point, it's not this futuristic, Hail Mary of this utopian sort of design. But really, at the end of the day, it's it's a concept to build social cohesion. And I'm really happy that James is on this too, because agriculture plays a tremendous, part of this. I mean, especially when we look at, new systems that are associated with this to produce, food, clean drinking water, and energy near the point of consumption. And I think that those are really important things. So just, kind of in a nutshell, I figured, just sort of started off with a universally accepted, unless, Peter and James have additions to it, but it's just sort of a universally accepted baseline of what a smart city is.
I would like to chip in here.
Yeah, please.
And seeing as I'm speaking from Ghana and West Africa, I would like to give sort of our perspective on things here. So smart cities are a wonderful idea, but there are a lot of cities already built. And there are a few initiatives. I've heard of one in Senegal, and I've heard of one here in Ghana to build fresh new smart cities. But in the vast majority of cases, the cities have already been built, and we're adding smart functions. And so I'm not sure at what stage you have become smart as a city, but I know that, for instance, London, you can pay for your parking using your phone, and that's a smart function. I know that there are places in Spain where they only pick up the garbage when the garbage bins, and in Europe there's collective garbage disposal. So you're putting your household garbage into a larger bin. When that bin is full, it gets picked up. Now, so these smart, I see it as a building up of these smart functions up to a certain threshold, and then you will call yourself smart. I don't know what that threshold is, and I'm sure there may be people here who might be able to better define it than me, but I really see it as a collaboration between the citizenry and the authorities, and that collaboration happens through the gathering, sharing, and reacting to data.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. I mean, so I think that as the David and James mentioned about it, there's so many. I think probably more than 500 smart city initiatives. I'm working on a Vietnamese smart city projects, and inside of Vietnam only, city initiatives are actually happening right now. So, but I'm actually trying to approach the much more important portion to approach this kind of concept. The definition of smart city seems to vary by country and the region around the world. And since the term of the smart city become more and more common nouns in the last 5 years specifically, it seems necessary to be more cautious about the concept, from the perspective of the municipalities and central government. From my humble opinion, I think the smart city means the process of efficiently solving various problems inherent in the city. The way to solve the problem in technology, services, and policies, and human resources. I think that will be the thing that we need to think about when it comes to smart city. Since entering the 21st century, 20 years ago, in the era of rapid technological revolution around the world, like, just talking about iPhones and everything, the smart cities tend to be regarded as the introduction of the latest technologies. But I have a question though: how you are actually really diligent to adopt any kind of the technological evolution, right? So I'm still learning the iPhone 12 and 13, so I'm still actually just struggling myself and getting to know what kind of function, because I believe myself only 15% of the functions of iPhone I use now. The rest of it, I have no idea. So that is actually a lot of organizations and industries, and even people, residents of the city, they actually consider smart city as only technology or services, but it's not. Attempts to solve the problems of the existing city, like kind of old city here in New York and in London or Paris, absolutely the major cities in Africa as well. Those cities have been demanded steadily since the creation of the city. Even the old cities, like with the 500 years history, 1,000 years history, and it's like, if you imagine you just travel to Istanbul, Turkey, that's an amazing city, but there might be a lot of things you have to think about to be shifted and changes. It may also affect urban regeneration or brownfield or greenfield development. So in that respect, the government needs to be more cautious about the concept, philosophy, and the action plan of the smart city building. In particular, the construction of new cities in Asia, the China, India, South Korea, Japan, and those kind of countries bring the major trend of smart city these days. I think that the governments needs to be much more open to the concept and philosophy of smart city, because those countries, they are mostly government top-end led the smart city initiatives, which actually consider the smart city is equals technologies, high technology is something. So this is because without the economic, cultural, and educational background or activities of people in the city, and that will be definitely the heart of the city. The sustainability is the key to support the cities anyway. Therefore, it would be good if a new technology were incorporated in the process of solving the problems existing in cities. I think that is kind of procedures of this kind of activities is a really important component of the smart city, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And, an important point you bring up there is solving issues and challenges that exist, and leveraging technologies, new technologies and processes into resolving those issues within. And that is a lot, I think, as between all of you, what you've said is what drives technology. One of the interesting things when I think of smart cities is that smart cities also are relative to time and development within a culture or a people's or geography, because where we are now compared to say the medieval period of time, we are definitely smart city compared to them, right? If they were to teleport today. And so it's always relative, the idea of smart city. We may in essence always be sort of chasing our tail in achieving smart cities, because all we're doing is really just incorporation. And again, collectively, you said that really is that smart cities is really all just about incorporating technologies. We've in another area that I'd like to get into before we leave the topic of smart cities in general, is the expectation of technology. So we talked about how technology can solve problems. What is the expectation of fixing problems? And is there a potential that technology and machine learning and artificial intelligence and so forth can make existing issues worse by implementing or adopting some of these technological advanced systems? And again, throw that out to the room.
Can I maybe go first now this time?
Sure.
As I said, technology isn't the only way to solve the problem of the city. The most important thing is how citizens who participate in urban activities and can share their urban experiences. If AI or technologies is really combined with this data, I think it will produce some good results out of smart city initiatives. Not only technology, but quality public services, innovation of local government agencies like municipalities, attraction of various companies, tech startups, and R&D centers or something like that, and improvement systems. Those are the key pillars in creating a smart city, I believe.
Yeah. David, James, anything to add?
I think Peter summed it up quite nicely, actually, for me.
Very good, very good. Certainly, yeah. Technology. One of maybe a sub question to that is, what about low tech solutions? I mean, I know there's a lot of emphasis, and it's always high tech and latest greatest is always sort of included in the idea or thought processes of smart cities. But what about existing low tech solutions and being able to advance some of the existing low tech options that can provide some of these same levels of efficiency? Are there opportunities there?
I think there must be. I'm not quite sure what low tech is, but let's look at some of the advances in
maybe existing tech.
Existing tech. Okay, so I mean, I think perhaps solar panels and sort of wind generation at a private level sort of fall into that. And there are initiatives certainly in the UK and certainly in some European and I believe even in America, certain states, it's possible to generate your own electricity and feed it back to the grid. That's smart. That's certainly smarter than a one-way pull from the grid all the time. And with the right incentives, it can become a fully fledged system in which the generation of electricity is decentralized. So I think if that counts as low tech, then there's plenty that can be done with low tech.
Yeah, it's not to be discarded. Yeah, existing.
No, at all.
Yeah. So to add to what James just spoke about, and then even to what Peter spoke about earlier, the technology that we use and that we're talking about, this enabling technology, whether it's high tech or low tech or just current technology, it's typically limited to the optimization of the existing systems that are there in a city, and whatever that city looks like, and I'm reflecting back on my years of living in Africa as well. You've got a very complex telecommunication system in Africa. And the reason why you have that is because there wasn't this archaic infrastructure that had existed for 100 years. Take, for example, got going on. If you cannot change your behavior, I'll just give you one example. I was living in the Middle East for the last 5 years. The vast majority of the villas that that are new construction within Saudi Arabia are LEED compliant. So you've got these amazing lighting systems, amazing electrical systems, and of course also there's fresh water that comes in from desalination plants. You would think that in that sort of environment that people would be more conscientious of energy consumption and water consumption. That's not the case. In fact, it's the complete opposite, because those people that live, especially on the compound that I lived in, their utilities they didn't have to pay for their utilities. And so consequently, you had people leaving lights on all the time, having their thermostats, turned down to the most comfortable setting that they could possibly have. And, spending, 3 and 4 hours in the morning watering their gardens and their patios. So until those behaviors change, everything that you do with regards to the concept of smart cities is moot, in my humble opinion.
Well, it's an interesting point, the something for nothing, right? So if there's no cost or to you as an individual, there's no regard given to the resource itself, and history is littered with prime examples of that, and again, you're right, that speaks to human nature completely. It's we have to change our attitudes toward that, and that of course is a longer haul.
Yeah, I totally agree with the David's ideas on that. My humble answer could be like, it doesn't have to be high tech. I believe that I stick with the kind of policy that the maintaining a great balance of the high tech and low tech, mid tech, because when planning a smart city master plan, things to consider are population, history, culture, economic scale of the cities, and urban infrastructure, GDP per capita, and the level of education of the citizens in the city. So even if we compare London and Hanoi, which are almost a similar population size, it is difficult to apply equivalent technologies. So what I actually was involved myself in the Cognicity initiative, which is a intelligent city in Canary Wharf. That is actually mingle of all high-tech things inside of the financial district. But in Hanoi, they're struggling to fight against the air pollution and water pollutions. So they are probably, for them, to build up the waste management system in Hanoi, that will be the #1 priority smart city functions out of this. So the concept of smart city can be seen only after abandoning the preconceived notion that is a smart city is really high tech. So I think that the how to apply the balancing the low tech and high tech. Even James mentioned about the agri tech. So we are actually working on agri tech in Ukraine and Vietnam. So the level of the technologies could be maybe vary from the low tech, real low tech, to how to irrigate to what they let the water flows inside of the field, and even the high tech to collecting the data from all the genes, or the how to just crop or something, right? So that is everybody's talking about high tech in smart city, but I strongly suggest to you that high tech is one of them, but probably maybe the majority group could be maybe mid tech or low tech in smart city.
Absolutely agree with what Peter just said. Phoenix, Arizona is a great example of that. They've been having water problems for the better part of the last 40, 50 years. That part of the United States has got these water sharing agreements with Colorado River. Richard, you're probably very familiar with this. So a lot of those states that are dealing with those water resource issues from the Colorado River have, there's tremendous political and tremendous economic strain that's put on that region because of that waterway. So to Peter's point about low tech, solutions, just one example, just one very, very simple, elegantly simple example of the way in which to conserve water and to repair the landscape and to restore it back to an agricultural system that existed between the 20th century, was they have this initiative called Tres Rios, where what they've done is they've used a lot of water recycling to create these natural riparian areas that used to exist along the Salt River back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So just that in and of itself, just using agricultural and irrigation techniques and systems that existed before the modern era, speaks to Peter's point. And there's nothing new under the sun. There's just smarter and better ways in which to do it, and those smarter and better ways don't always rely on technology.
I would just like to add to that, if that's
Sure.
okay, Richard.
Sure.
It sounds to me like the basis of smart cities is really collaboration. And as the cities get smarter, the levels of collaboration get sort of more granular. And I think that's what's happening. And I'm getting an unstable internet connection, so better stop speaking.
No, all good. Well, I like that. It's truly
by the United States government first. That is the number one concerns, and to meet some sort of a specific KPIs to achieve the goals of reduce the carbon. But we need to just go the case by cases, like smart cities in the developed countries and smart cities in developing countries, smart city in far behind the advanced the conditions. So as an example, smart city project currently underway, we are doing right now in Hanoi. I'm actually considering introducing an electricity motorbike systems and waste management systems to clean up the air, because the size of the population of Hanoi is almost equal to London. So about 9 million, almost 10 million people living in there. You cannot imagine how many scooters and motorcycles running around the city. It's actually outnumbered the entire public transportation systems. So everybody actually carrying out. You can even see the member of families in one scooter running around the city.
Yeah.
So those scooters is basically run by diesel and gasoline, and sometimes even you never know how old this scooter is. Probably maybe 20 years or 30 years. So there are two factors that actually cause the low air quality in the sky of Hanoi, which is from the mobility, those kind of the scooters or motorcycles. Number two, in the last 10 years, the average economic growth rate in Vietnam is 7%. It's actually the most, probably maybe highest fastest economic growth countries around the world, in Asia, of course. So you can even see, new buildings popped up every single month. Whenever I just visit Hanoi, sometimes I lost my way, and oh my God, there was no building down there. It's now new hotels down there. So, but the thing is, there's no regulation to cut down the kind of level of the pollutants, air pollutants, something kind of a lot of the dust coming out of the site of the construction. So there's no such a regulation to protect them. I think that so that is kind of priority number one. Number two, to making the city much more livable. Using, probably you can actually match up with the kind of the goals of the lower the carbon in the city. So, but if you try to mention that in New York City, for example, that might be a little bit different. Or maybe in Texas, there are a lot of factories and industrial zones and producing the energies or something like that. So you need to go, measure the different kind of different, take them different measures on the city by cities.
I would just like to add to that and say that obviously, as Peter mentioned, there are different countries are at different developmental stages. But that said, the SDGs form a framework for the governments to react and put the regulations in place to hopefully spur on some of these smart initiatives. We need regulations in place for carbon, for any sort of carbon dioxide collaboration to really work. So the importance of the Millennium SDGs, pushing the governments to make the environment hospitable for this kind of innovation is important.
Yeah, so I'd like to pile on what James and Peter just talked about and throw some ideas out. First and foremost, as an American, I apologize that the car culture in America is the way that it is, but I don't know how else to describe it. And then you want to reduce some carbon emissions, look at mobility issues. Get rid of cars that are over-engineered for what they basically do. I just had this conversation with a colleague a couple of days ago in preparation for this, and I was talking to him, and he's got I'm not going to use his name, so I'll tell you, he's got a monster truck. He's got one of those big Ford F-350 2-inch lift kit. And I asked him, I said, so, what do you use this car for? What do you use this truck for? Are you hauling dirt? Are you, hauling horses or something like that? And no, it's, more of a status thing than anything else, right? So it's over-engineered for what he actually uses it for. And he uses it to go to and from work, from home, and to run errands. So do you really need, a $60,000 or $70,000, four-wheel drive, truck to go and do those kinds of things, right? So if you a little bit of an exaggeration with my friend's truck, but that's how I feel about it. Like it's this, crazy behemoth, right? So so I guess the alternative to that is, what about autonomous vehicles? What about 3D printed autonomous vehicles that are able to get you along a route in your community, in your hometown or your city, that does regular stops to the to the bodega, or to the grocery store, to the Piggly Wiggly, to the pharmacy, to wherever you needed to go. So just by looking at mobility issues alone, getting those cars, getting 50% of the cars off the roads, and I'm thinking of the Western world, that in and of itself would be phenomenal. And then you think about the cultural applications of it. To Peter's point, in Vietnam, I was there in 2019, and I saw with my own eyes this elegant dance of scooters on these roads where nobody got in accidents, and everybody sort of were very intuitive and like how they negotiated. I'm like, wow, that's That's pretty brilliant. I mean, that's just really something to watch. All right. Well, what if you were to take half of those people and instead of them driving their scooters, they walked, right? Or they rode bikes, or they took public transportation because the public transportation system was people were incentivized to take public transportation. You'd see a tremendous amount of carbon emissions, cut almost overnight. But it goes back to my earlier point. As a humanist, I would say this. It goes back to my earlier point about changing human behavior. And until we start doing that, and any sort of idea, it's not going to make a difference, because you know as well as I do, Richard, that the car culture in the United States is such that really you're going to try and convince people not to own a car.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because culturally we've been weaned on that since the Industrial Revolution. So
absolutely.
Bring that the idea again of perception coming up, because like in India, the perception of the majority of the population is that the public transportation is unreliable. So even if it is be reliable, the perception still they feel confident to be able to take it to get from point A to point B instead of getting on their scooter, which they know they can do. And so again, it goes back to that mutual understanding and cultural awareness and understanding about what these advancements can do. Okay, moving on. There's one other topic I want to cover under this, and that, of course, is sustainability. One of the big issues with smart cities, and again, the incorporation and integration of advanced technologies and so forth, is the sustainable aspects of it. What happens when things need to get updated, when hardware, software, as you have, micro systems talking to macro systems, and then you have cities talking to cities. When one city needs to get updated and hardware updated, and the other one is still on the other, what legacy issues can happen there? So what are your thoughts about that in regard to the sustainability aspect of integration and updating hardware, software, and so forth?
Well, you just consider that, you have iPhone system, right? So it's like auto updated, or sometimes you manually update them, right? So the same thing like with a smart city. But the thing is, if you actually just go advance into the kind of discussions of, regarding the city, this is much more sophisticated with a legal conflict, and also they're trying to protect their profits out of this kind of whole scheme.
Right.
That's why we are approaching the smart city. It's not about the entire city. We're just talking about smart city London. It doesn't have to be entire London. Every city they go for the kind of it's not really manifesto, because I'm just big believer of SDGs from UN, but the implementation is something different. So we urge the local governments to start with a small project, which is called the Smart City, testbed, which is actually the small or maybe mid-size of the scheme of the regulatory tech sandbox in it. So somebody, and probably maybe UN or government, they actually prefer to say living lab, but living lab is like kind of, not commercialized implementation level. It's actually test stage. We just like prefer to say test bed with the commercializations with those kind of the solutions such as hardware and software. Everything we're just talking about, those software that should be updated, right? So we basically need to talk about who's going to own the data, how the data should be shared, and everything. This kind of question is including that kind of notion as well. So that is something that kind of agreement between the public sectors and private sectors, and even the citizens or not citizens, frequent travelers to the city, they have to agree on how to be, the keeping up with the data shared and also updated with the data vault.
Yeah, very, very true. David, James, anything else to add to that? All right.
Yeah. So just briefly. So Peter brought up something very interesting, and this is the concept of having an environment to test all your emerging technology before you basically release it into the wild. So I think that speaks to the data, how the data is collected, how it's updated, how systems talk to each other. I'm a big advocate of this concept of a city lab, having an environment where the community of interest within the smart city ecosystem, in whatever spectrum they're in, they can go into a place like this idea of a city lab where they can basically test it out to make sure that it is what they think it is, and do it in a way that it is have a chance to sort of iron out all the kinks, like I said before, they released it into the wild. So I think that's one of the ways in which you can help with this data transfer and data understanding and growth and so forth.
Great. Yep. Maintaining sustainability is just absolutely critical to the success of any of these systems as they're implemented, because without sustainability, they die on the vine, 5, 10, 15, 50 years later. And designing toward that is always such a challenge. All right, trying to stay on schedule, we'll go to the last category, which is governments and cities. And actually, again, great segue, because we've kind of touched on some of these issues. And that has to do with, security, privacy, what data is being collected. Certainly, there's a tremendous amount of discussions and concerns at all levels across all countries about the issues and challenges with that, as well as the benefits. So getting into that, what types of data specifically do you anticipate being collected by systems that get implemented?
So I'll take the lead on this one. Being the government guy, right?
Right.
So in a lot of the conversations I'm involved in, the vast majority of the data that is universally pointed to is phone data. Clicking that button that allows for privacy on your phone is critical. So it's an education process with a specific population, whether it's Western Europe, because they had this argument at the highest levels, or this conversation at the highest levels just recently, with privacy issues related to social media platforms. The United States, I think, is just now really coming into its own to really understand the implications that are associated with this, not just from a commercial standpoint, but from the ability of, I'll just use this recent example of local law enforcement, federal law enforcement being able to track the movements of the rioters that participated in the riots in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. There was some publicly released footage of cell phone data, tracking the movements of these individuals from where they were at the listening to the president's speech, and then them moving down Pennsylvania Avenue to the Capitol building. So educating people that to know that their cell phone, if they decide that they want to have a cell phone, they're going to be giving up some freedoms. They're going to be giving up some autonomy related issues. Their data has the possibility to be shared. Now, that law enforcement example aside, a great other example of using data to better improve an environment through the use of cell phones is the small principality of Angora, right in between Spain and France. I don't need to tell you guys about that. You know where it is, but they recently used cell phone data to be able to understand the behaviors of tourists coming into their principality, to better service them, to better align amenities, to better align places to get gas while you're getting out of town, or things like that. So it's a real trade-off. But I think that we need to educate populations from a security standpoint, from a privacy standpoint. Hey, you can either opt in or opt out, to share your data. And I'm speaking specifically about cell phones. In some instances, people are never asked about it. But think about arriving into a country and you turn on your cell phone and you automatically get these welcome messages. Well, wouldn't that be pretty cool if in those welcoming messages, they ask you to respond either one or two, that you would allow for your data to be, your cell phone data to be used in order to better their experience, your experiences in that country? Text back 1 for yes, 2 for no.
Right.
That I think would go a long way. I think in terms of trust, in terms of comfortability, and all of those things. So those are just some initial thoughts on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with David's comments on that, because this is very sensitive concerns and regarding the data. So that's why my initiatives in the smart city projects around the world is basically we are establishing the specific regulatory tech sandbox where the collecting the data and ownership of the data is actually happening there. Since pandemic last year, some of the countries like in Asia, like in South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and Vietnam, they actually have apply the tracking systems, just like David mentioned about everybody, an individual actually carry their own cell phone, their smartphones, and they have they force the people to the traveling into the country, they set up, they download the specific app, and then the government agency can actually just track it down. And you should be locked down your home. If you get out, they actually find them, or they find you where you're going. So this is very controversial that maybe the smart city collects all the individual data based on the smartphones or cell phones, that will be very tricky to develop the better smart city initiatives. So, sorry.
It's for you, Peter.
That's more.
It's the future. Okay. It's calling.
This is actually tracking systems, yeah. And so I believe that one of the platform we're actually establishing right now is the platform that only the people signed up, electrically signed up for participating in the smart city agenda. So those whom throughout the social media or some specific the tech sandbox platform, they are actually eager to share their data with the government sectors and also private sectors. So for example, we are in Hanoi, we are actually targeting on reducing the conventional motorcycles and scooters by 2025, reducing by 25% of entire scooters in Hanoi. So which is actually big challenging projects, but it's not about the shifting the existing one to the electric the motorcycle. It's basically we're changing entire ecosystem, providing the sensors. For example, Central London kind of platform. And if you don't have any tag in your car, if you're just passing through the Central London, you will be getting fined from the transport, London transport, right? So the same thing, we are trying to find out only electric cars can access to the designated area as a step-by-step. So that is one of the examples to collecting the data, to making the high tech much more feasible, or maybe making sense in it.
I want to add something there, Richard, which is
yes,
that
please.
We're at a very interesting stage in the development of the world. We have a number of technology initiatives that are really sort of enabling us to question those in charge of our countries and of the world. And in fact, there seems to be a bit of a movement to remove a little bit of that power. But when we talk about smart cities, we realize how much we rely on the government and the authorities. And in fact, we find ourselves in a spot where we actually must work with the governments. And this is kind of going against a lot of what's happening in technology at the moment, right? And so that keeps us in a very interesting time. We're having to balance these two polemics. I don't know if we lost.
Yeah, with
Lost Richard.
I think.
Pretty sure, right?
Well, James, I think that was
Yeah.
very well said.
Well, thank you
Yeah,
very
James,
much. Thank you very much.
And we're at this point, I think, where there's this tension between this sort of autonomy that human beings want, but they still have this reliance on the services and infrastructure that governments provide. So how much do you give up in what do you receive for in exchange for what you give up? We refer to it in the United States as this social contract, that we've got this social
Yes.
contract with with our governments. In order for us to have all of these certain things, we give up as citizens. We give up certain things, certain freedoms, for example. But one of the things that I think that would be of import as we, I guess we're sort of wrapping up here with this whole discussion, is in order to really, and I've been thinking about this for a while, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, James and Peter, is I think in order for us to really do smart cities, do it in a way that we've sort of discussed. I made a little list here about this is what I think that we need to do, and I'm interested in your feedback. Create a process that brings together agile urban design methods. Okay, so that's the first thing. Emerging technologies, public policy, right, and inclusive decision making. Yep. So I just have this idea that, okay, nothing's going to change until there's a public policy, discussion. A public policy discussion has to be held from a grassroots level, from the community, from the citizens that live in that community. And then in order to implement this smart city concept, utilizing the technology, you got to have some of this agile urban design methodologies, in my humble opinion. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, James.
I think you're absolutely right. I think those 4 points that you made are absolutely right. We do need to start the public policy discussion, and then that sort of drives some of the other initiatives. But yeah, spot on.
Peter, what do you think?
Well, actually, yeah, you're absolutely right. Same thing actually James mentioned earlier, and David. I think that we recently talking about decentralization's approach, like a blockchain ecosystem. Yeah. We're living in the kind of era that had, the people making money through the Bitcoin, right? Yeah. So because the world is getting much more sophisticated, and people, even decades ago, the central dominance, the media and everything, they actually monopolized the sharing the data or also information. But now the people get access to any kind of data. They can actually even produce data by themselves to share with the other people. So decentralized kind of concept will be actually kicking off and probably maybe spur more in many different areas. So the smart city initiatives that I'm actually building right now is blockchain concept. Decentralized, the concept is actually embedded in there to get access to much more the frequent the citizens' activities. For example, like maybe we can actually maybe have another chance to talk about the agri-tech in the small cities with James and maybe David together sometime later. But this kind of, we are talking about smart city, in my humble opinion, is a smart city 1.0 now. So we're not talking about mature smart city. So you never know which way, which direction we can go with. But as I said earlier, though, the people should be centered into any kind of topics we're just talking about, smart city and the finance and agriculture. The most important component of the city to support for the future is the human. So I think that this is.
Yeah, so I think I'm looking at the time here. I think we're coming up on our hour, but I think if we just sort of close out with a couple of comments, I think that would help sort of put a bow on this whole conversation and package it up nicely, and that we can go about our days. But James, do you have any sort of final thoughts on this conversation?
It's very exciting. I'm very excited. We have, as you mentioned, there's a lot of blank paper here in Africa. So we are likely to, at some stage, if all the right stars align, see some of the most interesting smart cities, because we'll be starting from very little in most cases. So we are very excited for what the future brings. I want to live to be 200.
So do I. Hey, Peter, you got any final thoughts?
I really enjoy the sharing our insights together. I think this kind of conversation always producing the better impacts and to the people who might be interested in what's happening with the city and what's happening with the many different topics with the city. So the PPP-based smart city is the most important thing. As I mentioned earlier, the Asian nations, countries, they actually government-led smart city projects and everywhere. It's not going to actually last a longer time. I mean, because who's going to actually support the city? It's actually people and citizens. Even you can actually compare the city with other cities in Asia. If you actually visit, Nice, the beautiful harbor, beautiful, the city in South France. It's actually the population is only 340,000 people there, but annual visitors to the city is more than 2 million. Yeah. So you have to think about, do we actually just stay with the only citizens or maybe frequent travelers to the Nice, environment? So the how to just inviting people and activities to the city is very important. The way of doing that doesn't have to be like kind of controlled by the government. It should be like a kind of flat and equal opportunities, achieving the goals and throughout the smart city platform. But
yeah, I gotta agree with you, Peter, on this, but add into the complexity of a world pandemic, and then all of a sudden, that changed the dynamics and way in which people interact with each other. So I think we're up on the hour. I'll just close out and say, I'm a humanist. I believe that until we change the behavior and universally accept, these ideas of sustainability, energy, reduce energy consumption, looking for those ways in which, technology, actually enhances and enables our human existence in these urban areas, these aggregation areas, whether it's out in the country or, in these little towns and villages and cities. I think that the future is exciting, to James's point, and I look forward to the continued conversation with both of you in the future. And I think probably with that, I will go ahead and sign off. And thank you again for all of the folks at Digital Week Online. This has been really enjoyable, and I look forward to collaborating with you in the future. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, James.
Yep.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Dave. Cheers.